Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore practical, science-backed strategies for aging gracefully and living a healthier, longer life. In this episode, we'll discuss one of the most simplest and most powerful activities for maintaining health as we age, walking. Specifically, how just 30 minutes a day of brisk walking can lead to profound health benefits and help us to age well.
Dr. Armstrong, the other day I came across this pretty cool historical piece on the Roman Empire, and it was fascinating. It turns out that some of the common folks during that time frame, they actually had a really similar diet to an American fairground diet.
What's that mean?
Means that they had a lot of deep fried everything. They just stuffed things on a stick and boiled it and fried it and then ate it.
I see. That kind of sounds like my sister lives in Iowa now, and they fry butter there, I believe.
Oh, wow. I've never had fried butter.
Don't try it. We're trying to
I've
age
had
well.
fried Pepsi before.
Pepsi?
Yeah, they make a batter out of Pepsi and then they fry it. It's not worth it. It's not worth the hype. Kind of.
Well, is it okay if it's Diet Pepsi?
Yes. It just tastes like dough. That's all it tastes like.
Well, of course, that's all it's going to taste like, because the Pepsi is just giving it maybe a little different flavor, I assume. But
now, we don't recommend deep fried food, but if you need to satisfy that craving, I would always suggest a deep fried Oreo, personally.
No.
I think there's just
good God, no. I wouldn't recommend an Oreo, period. I just saw a video recently where they were taking a blowtorch to an Oreo, and it was like, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, all the way up to I don't know how many minutes they were frying this thing with it, and it wouldn't change. It wouldn't catch fire, wouldn't burn, anything. It's like, you don't want something like that in your digestive tract. And I do like fried chicken on occasion, especially when it's good fried chicken, not something, crappy frozen or just really, just poorly made kind of stuff. But if it's good quality and overall you're picking some fairly healthy ingredients, then on occasion it's not too bad. I lived in Texas for a while. I love chicken fried steak, but I'm not going to eat it every day. Maybe once every 3 to 5 years I might have it. But definitely not fried Oreos or fried butter. Think of what you're frying. It's like fried cauliflower. Why? Why would you do some of that kind of stuff?
I don't know.
So the Romans are eating fried food. I did not know that.
Yeah, so they were eating fried food, but obviously, if you look at their pictures and stuff, they're way more sculpted than we are in the classic American diet.
Well, technically we don't see photographs of them. We see, sculptures and stuff. I wonder if they were really that cut, but.
Well, true. But one of the things that the article chalked it up on is after their heavy meal in the evenings, in order to properly help food be digested, they would go on a walk for 30 to 40 minutes. I started thinking, okay, if that's what they use to help digest their food, then what would adding 30 minutes a day of 30 minutes to our daily routine of just walking, how would that help an individual age? I thought, what a great topic that would be. I started diving into it a bit. I did send us an article of how walking just 30 minutes a day can lead to these results on your body. I thought we should dive into this. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into the science behind something as simple as walking. Now, I think it's been pretty obvious for millennia probably, but from an exercise science standpoint, that walking is a very important and often overlooked and accessible way of exercising. I think there's a fine line between exercise and physical activity when it comes to walking, and we can talk a little bit about that. I often talk to my students in terms of, you're really not exercising if you can walk with a hot cup of coffee. As we define exercise as physical activity that is done for the intent of improving one's health, performance, or appearance. then it can fall into that category. But we got to realize what are the benefits that we are actually getting from it. And so it's not going to be a cure-all. I think, we've discussed pretty frequently on the podcast that I would put more emphasis on resistance training as our primary exercise, but we can definitely get a good bit of benefit out of, in addition to that resistance training, getting some walking into our day. It doesn't have to be for any purpose other than just to improve our digestion, improve our health, get us outside, and do things that are going to make us age well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we obviously dive into the importance of exercise, but sometimes for a novice or someone that's just about to start their journey, it can be a little overwhelming. But walking, I just feel like that's something really simple. That's something that anyone can do, and it's free, right? And if you have the mobility and if you're in a neighborhood that allows you to walk on the paths, it should be awesome. When we talk about walking, specifically walking for 30 minutes a day, what exactly does that look like? And why is it so important?
I think there's a couple things too to address in just what you said. Is one thing I think is, as communities, we've been touting the Make America Healthy Again movement. In order for people to meet that minimum of walking 30 minutes a day, we need to have communities and environments that are making it accessible to individuals. So what are the barriers that we can bring down? Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that as the podcast continues today. But I think it is a great question. That 30-minute mark is quite important because it's enough time to give us some of those significant health benefits. And again, it's a very achievable goal for anybody. Because remember, that 30 minutes doesn't have to be all at one time. It can be cumulative throughout the day. So if you can get up and walk 5 minutes at a time, or give yourself a little extra distance to walk to and from your car to wherever you're going, that is going to add up to that 30 minutes. And then maybe we can go beyond that 30 minutes. There's quite a bit of literature out there that does show that a brisk walk for just 30 minutes a day can improve our cardiovascular health. It can boost our mood. It can help prevent or manage some chronic diseases we're seeing, things like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and even some types of cancer. So there was actually one study, I believe it was published in The Lancet, and we'll have links to some of these studies in the description notes, but it found that just 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week, and that's the ACSM guidelines, about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, can actually lower the risk of early death by 20 to 30%. Wow. That's a simple prescription. Just go walk 30 minutes. You got to watch. You can time yourself. You got legs. Walk. Again, some people might have more difficulty walking, but walk within your capacity. We talk, what is a brisk walk? Well, a brisk walk for me is going to be different than it might be for somebody else. I always laugh with my students. I tell them the story about when I was working in New York in corporate fitness. I worked with this girl, and I can't remember her name. It's probably good because I would probably say it on air, and I don't want to do that. She was probably about 5 foot tall in heels. I mean, she was maybe not quite that short, but she was pretty short, and I'm 6'5". And she would be on the treadmill running. We'd have time on our lunch breaks to exercise, and she's on the treadmill running 5 miles an hour. Her little feet are going as fast as possible. And I get on a treadmill next to her, and I'm walking at 5 miles an hour at like an elevation of like 10%. And she would be like, "Would you please move to another treadmill? You're embarrassing me." But it's like, it's important to understand that our speeds are going to be different based on our body mechanics. And so, if a brisk walk for you is 3 miles an hour, great, do it. If it's not, then walk a little bit faster. I tend to walk fast. And the more I can do that, and I think it's a bit more intentional, maybe not as mindfully intentional for me, but it's in the back of my head that when I'm going somewhere, I want to walk as fast as possible to kind of not necessarily get into exercise mode, but reap as much benefit as I can from that walk. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, we're built differently, obviously.
I'm built better, but...
Yeah. No, but it is incredible. And I think it's actually amazing how something so basic can have such a major impact on us. You mentioned cardiovascular health, and the article talked about the other benefits of it. Adding 30 minutes. It says that it would lower risk of age-related disease, lower risk of cognitive impairment, better mental health, improve body composition, better sleep. But just with cardiovascular health alone, that's one of the key benefits that we often hear about when it comes to walking. Do you think you could elaborate on how walking specifically benefits your health?
Yeah, certainly. And remember, we define aerobic exercise as any exercise that is rhythmical in nature and using, as much of a whole body exercise as possible. And so walking, especially when we're walking briskly, we're getting the arms involved. You're using quite a bit of the musculature of the body to perform locomotion, to move the body. And so it's one of the best ways to get our heart pumping in a safe and sustainable manner. We don't need any special equipment. We all can walk within our own limitations. Of course somebody can't, but then there's alternatives to that. And, obviously if you can't walk for exercise or for health, we find other alternatives. There was a 2017 study published in the American Journal of Public Health that found, and again, this is nothing earth-shattering, but they found that regular walking, especially brisk walking, is linked to a significant reduction in cardiovascular disease. I think we've known that. The fact that they had published an article in 2017, it's like, to me, it's kind of a well, duh moment as opposed to an aha moment. But we've known for a long, long time. But, there's plenty of research out there that has shown that just 30 minutes a day of moderate intensity walking can lower our blood pressure, improve our cholesterol levels, reduce inflammation. And all of these are key factors in maintaining heart health. And in addition, walking is probably one of the best ways for weight management. Just burning calories easily and as much as possible. It can reduce a lot of strain on the heart. We don't have to necessarily go into high intensity interval type training or, hard exercise like on a bike or an elliptical or have any special equipment to put a little bit of effort on the heart to burn some calories and increase our caloric expenditure so that we can shift toward a caloric deficit and lose weight. I always teach my students the 100 kilocalorie rule. Now, this applies more specifically to somebody who is kind of the normal, so-called normal body weight of about 70 kilograms. Now, the average American was probably a little bit larger than that, but it's based off of that model. It's 100 kilocalories expended whether you are walking, jogging, or running. So if you just move a distance of a mile, you're burning 100 kilocalories. So if you can walk a 15-minute mile pace, then you're burning 200 calories in that period of time walking the 30 minutes. If you walk a little faster, you're going to burn more calories. If you're walking slower, it might not be quite as much. You might want to walk a little bit longer. And again, that is going to be dependent upon body weight. So me being 6'5", 230 pounds, I'm going to burn more calories than my wife, who is 5'6", I think, and about 140 pounds. So it makes a big difference in terms of our size. But if you use that as a rule of thumb, you don't have to worry about calculating your energy expenditure. It's like, okay, I'm going to go out and I want to burn 300 kilocalories, so I got to get out and walk 3 miles. Boom, you're done. It can really help with our weight management. It can also lower the risk of stroke by improving our blood flow and our circulation. Getting outside, raising that body temperature a little bit, getting the blood circulating, all that helps to keep the cardiovascular system healthy.
I vaguely remember in one of your classes.
You vaguely remember my classes? That's great.
No, obviously it was almost a decade ago, right? But
it was more than a decade ago, Corbin. You're getting old.
Was it? Oh, well, yeah, it was.
And that just shows how old I am.
Yeah. I remember there was a gal in one of the classes, and they had asked, like, well, where would we burn more fat would it be from running that mile or walking several miles? And I think the answer was walking would burn more fat in the moment, because as we are keeping a steady pace with an increased heart rate, we're not to a point where we're not breathing heavy. We're still taking in as much oxygen as it's flowing throughout the body. But then sprinting would burn more carbohydrates in the body, but then the afterburn effect would take. I think that's what the answer was. Am I misremembering that, or is that?
I'm not sure of all the specifics where you're going
Okay.
with this, but I would say, the distance covered is going to be pretty much the marker of the calories burned. Where those calories come from is a little bit more intensity dependent. If you're sprinting, the total of a mile. So you're doing a bunch of sprints, you do a bunch of 100-meter dashes that all add up to a mile. In the moment, you are burning carbohydrate while you're doing that sprint, and you're dependent upon your ATP PC system, your more anaerobic energy systems. But ultimately, you have to replenish that energy in the muscle. And so that's going to come oxidatively. And so it will take less time to complete the distance if you're doing it with higher intensity and doing it faster. You might have a little bit more cardiovascular benefit, I think, with a higher intensity, because you are working the heart a little bit harder. But if the primary goal is just simply to burn calories, the lower intensity is a little bit easier on the body, particularly for somebody who is in less shape or has some physical limitations where higher intensity exercise isn't warranted. But in the end, you're burning the same number of calories. The big difference is going to be that you're burning those calories faster the higher intensity. And you mentioned kind of an afterburn. There is some evidence out there, and I don't think it's, to the point where we can say it's absolute. There is, some equivocal evidence involved, but there is some indication that higher intensity interval type of training actually elevates our metabolism over the course of time. And I think this is where you're going for in terms of the question you're asking. And so if we're doing a more high intensity interval type of training, there might be more calories burned because we may see an elevated excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC, over the course of hours, and even to the point of maybe days, like as much as 48 hours post-exercise. And that might only be a couple calories. I think I've seen some studies that have reported as high as 15 kilocalories of excess energy expenditure post. Now that adds up over the course of days. The type of exercise that we might be talking about is going to make the difference there. So we're doing high intensity interval type training, then we may see more calories burned than just the 100 kilocalorie rule. But remember, we're talking just a guideline rule of thumb. You have to do what works best in your scenario. And I think walking as a form of increased physical activity is a really good benefit. And if it's exercise for you, if that's the intensity of exercise that's going to work for you, great. And always work toward trying to get more intense in the exercise as we safely can. Now, we will see better benefits the more we're able to do it at a higher intensity for a longer duration. High intensity gives us a little bit more of a time advantage. More low intensity walking is still going to give us some health benefits, certainly going to give us, improved mood and just improved circulation. Maybe not the improvement in VO2 max that we might want to improve performance. But from a general health standpoint, just walking is going to be very good. Did that answer your question there?
Yeah, no, definitely. It does bring up the question when you say you want to increase intensity, and I think the outcome of that would be for someone that's listening and they're like, well, how do I increase the intensity of walking? I think one would be eventually pick up the pace while you're walking, right? Move faster, or find a new route that has a higher incline. Or if you're walking on a treadmill, increase the incline on that, right? Is you don't have to increase the speed because you're going to feel like you've increased the speed with the incline. I think that those would be some pretty cool pro tips for an individual who's starting their journey and they're wanting to walk and they start walking, but they're like, okay, I need to listen to Dr. Armstrong on the Aging Well podcast, and he tells me that I need to increase my intensity. And how do I do that? Well, I think
Yeah, that is the challenge when we're looking at walking outside. Most people walking outside are not going to have a highly variable course where they can alter where they're, the grades that they're walking. I mean, you have a course that you're going to be walking, it's going to be pretty standard, but you can increase the pace, start walking more briskly. And this should be a progressive overload. You should be always trying to push it just a little bit faster. Even if we're doing it for a more relaxing walk, you don't want to keep doing the same pace day after day after day. Again, if you're doing it for relaxation and basic health benefits, walking to your favorite coffee shop, picking up a cup of coffee and being able to walk home with that cup of coffee, that's going to give you some health benefits, not going to necessarily give you performance benefits unless you're willing to slosh some of that hot coffee on yourself. But if you're doing it for more exercise, just constantly be trying to get that distance done in a little bit less time and just progressively overload the system and get, your heart stronger and stronger and stronger. If you can change the course, maybe start out as you're walking, if you have access to high school track, school track, or any kind of flat surface to walk around. Where I grew up, our high school had a really nice 1 mile circle around the high school. It was an easy walk. There was very little grade to it. Now getting there could be a little bit different. Being in Pittsburgh, it was pretty much uphill both ways. And
barefoot in the snow.
In the snow, yeah. And if you're going to walk in the snow, it makes it even more challenging. But, if you have a flat surface, and you may have to drive to get to that track, if the hills around you are too difficult, don't feel guilty about driving to a place that you can walk. Now, if you can walk to that place, I would feel a little bit guilty, driving to a track to walk when you live like a half mile away. Walk there, walk on the track, and walk home. But, remember, we always talk about kind of find your why nots. What's keeping you from walking? I don't have a treadmill at home. Okay, well, you have ground around you. Get some decent shoes. They don't have to be expensive running shoes or anything. Just get comfortable, durable shoes. Get out and walk. If the weather gets bad, we live in the Portland area. It's actually sunny today, but, tomorrow it might be raining. Have some rain gear that you can go out and walk in. So don't eliminate the excuses that you might have that might keep you from walking. And then start walking, progress it. If you can't change the grade, you've kind of maxed out on the speed, maybe consider adding a little bit more weight to your body. Now, you're losing weight too by doing this exercise, so you're losing some body fat. I would not recommend using ankle weights or hand weights. A lot of people recommend that. I am of the belief that it tends to, especially if you have to try and progressively overload the weights, it's going to have a negative impact on your walking mechanics. Yeah. And we don't want to throw off our walking mechanics because that's where we can begin to develop some overuse injuries and things like that. So I'm not a big fan of walking with weights in your hands. Maybe, a weighted, like Nordic walking sticks or something like that might be beneficial. But I would look at, you can get a backpack or a weighted vest and just progressively add some weight to that. So the heavier you are, the more calories you're burning, the more work your body is doing walking that same speed. So that's one way of progressive overload. You can look at walking too. Walk as much as you can to and from a grocery store when you get carrying the bags. Then you kind of bring in that whole farmer's walk kind of thing, and you're working the core muscles a little bit more effectively. And you can add weight to that. So there's ways that you can overload the system to make it a little bit more challenging and improve your health.
Now, the article, it talked about like tips on adding that 30-minute walk routine into your daily, like how do you get started? And it says, make it official, Prioritize walking by adding workouts to your calendar. Pick an ideal time because you want to be consistent. You don't want to be too early in the morning and then hit the snooze button a bunch of times. You don't want it too late at night because you got stuff you got to get done. So pick a time where you can always hit it and have it be ideal. Make it fun. Pick a walking buddy. Remember your why, and we talk about that a lot. So set your goal and have that pace be that pace, and make sure that you're wearing comfortable clothes.
Make sure you're wearing clothes, period.
Yeah, make sure you're wearing clothes. And then obviously it says, okay, well, what if you work a busier job? A lot of them have treadmill desk where it's just a little tiny treadmill that you put underneath your desk and you can just walk. My wife actually, she ordered one of those, and she tries to walk 3 miles a day. I don't know if she does it all the time, but I know that when she does do it, she's really happy and excited about it. But obviously, as the day progresses, sometimes she has meetings, and so it kind of looks weird if she's walking on a Skype meeting or on a Teams meeting.
There's a podcaster. Is it Ben Greenfield? I think is the podcaster. He'll do a lot of his interviews walking on a treadmill. Maybe we should be doing that. I don't have my treadmill in the most appealing area of the house. It's in our garage, so that's probably the reason or the excuse I can give for not doing this podcast while walking on a treadmill. But I mean, you can do your meetings. You mentioned having meetings at work. Make them walking meetings, rather than coming and sitting in a conference room. Walk around the campus of the business and have our meeting. It's a bit more enjoyable. You're getting a change of place. You're interacting in a slightly different way. It's going to have health benefits for everybody, and it sets an example for the workplace. Like, hey, we encourage exercise here and good healthy behavior, and we want to engage you in doing that.
So what if someone is listening and they're like, man, I really want to, but I'm not able to walk. Like I'm in braces or have a walker, and so it's really hard to walk for me, or I'm in a wheelchair. What are some other alternative suggestions that we could give to those individuals that are trying to get up and move? I guess you could say walk into the next step for aging well.
I mean, if you are in any way mobile, whatever form of locomotion you depend on is locomotion. So movement is movement. So somebody in a wheelchair, I mean, they're having to engage a lot more effort in just simply moving around, unless it's a mechanical wheelchair. Mm. But you can wheel around for exercise. You're getting it with the arms as opposed to the legs, and you may be not burning quite the same level of calories, but it is still activity. There are bikes that can be used by people without use of their legs. They can pedal with their arms, and you can get outside and be mobile. So you can even go out in a wheelchair and wheel along a friend or a partner that is walking. If you have a walker, can you get into an environment where you can begin to move a little bit more, that maybe you become a little less dependent on that walker? Doing it in a safe environment where you're kind of pushing the limits of your mobility, and by mobility I'm talking about your locomotive ability, to get yourself exercising a little bit more. Again, everybody's an individual. One overlooked principle of adaptation is the principle of individuality. The fact that we're talking about walking today, I don't want to exclude our viewers or listeners that, I can't walk, or, I have physical limitations that's going to prevent me from walking, so I'm just going to tune out of this particular episode. It's really, when we're talking about 30 minutes of walking, we're talking about really 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity. So what does that mean for you? What can you do to get yourself mobile, moving? And maybe it's not moving per se, but moving what available limbs you have to get your heart rate up and move around a little bit. So do what you're capable of doing and just do more of it.
Yeah, I kind of want to switch gears a bit and talk about some of the other benefits of walking. That there's some literature out there that talks about how walking, even that 30 minutes a day, can decrease inflammation in the body. And inflammation, I know that's kind of a buzzword, especially with all of the food that we're eating, and people are becoming so aware that almost everything that we put in our mouth is starting to cause inflammation, whether it's on a minuscule level or a huge level. And after our interview with Dr. Farrow, I know the importance of it. Even our interview with Dr. Patel, and as she was talking about inflammation through the body and how that can affect sleep hygiene, that can affect your mouth. Like inflammation, it does some nasty effects on the body because your body's in overdrive trying to prevent that inflammation from occurring. So I guess with walking, is that going to help lower the inflammation? And could you explain how walking would reduce that inflammation to lower the stress that we put on our bodies just by daily life?
Yeah, absolutely. And chronic low-grade inflammation, often referred to as silent inflammation, doesn't necessarily cause immediate symptoms that we think of with inflammation, like swelling, redness, heat, fever, and those types of things. And a lot of us, especially as we're aging, are experiencing cumulative effects of low-grade inflammation. And low-grade chronic inflammation is one of the major contributors to a lot of the age-related diseases like arthritis, think of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, all of those are impacted in some way by low-grade inflammation. We talk about the role of obesity being central in a lot of diseases. Along with that is inflammation. One of my PhD mentors, Dr. Michael Flynn, in an article with some colleagues coined the term inflamm inactivity. Just that connection between our low levels of activity and what that does for disease and the aging process. And a lot of, we talk about aging, we think of it just as years on a calendar, but really aging is the decline of physical function. And a lot of that is related to the chronic inflammation that we put our bodies into and our inability to keep up with recovering from that inflammation over time. Walking, even at a moderate pace, can help regulate many of these inflammatory markers. And there was a 2018 study published in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience that found that regular physical activity, and again, this is not earth-shattering research by any means, but low intensity regular physical activity, such as walking, reduces levels of C-reactive protein, which is a key marker in inflammation. And so this means that walking can actively lower systemic inflammation and over time reduce the risk of some of these chronic conditions that are associated with aging. So just simply moving can have a positive effect on reducing some of the negative aspects of inflammation.
So it almost seems like those Romans were actually onto something. After a meal, that would be the best time to go on a walk because you're helping digest the food, break it down, but also preventing inflammation. Would that be a safe assessment to suggest?
Yeah, and I don't know that necessarily the timing of the Romans walking right after a meal would have had the same implications. I think it's just a matter of moving a lot more throughout the day. But certainly if they're eating all the fried food that you said they would, then inflammation may have been a possible variable in there. I think more so than just worrying about having the opportunity to walk right after a meal, ideally, we should kind of get the body engaged a little bit more, keep walking, get that circulation going so that we're facilitating the, some of the peristaltic actions within the digestive system just by moving. but also by, getting the blood circulating. And you don't want it to be too high of an intensity of activity because we want to get some blood flow to the viscera, to the organs. And so just getting that circulation up just a little bit to be able to pick up those nutrients, get them through the liver to get processed and get rid of some of the bad toxins in our food and all that kind of stuff can be very helpful.
Yeah. And honestly, we're just scratching the surface, just talking about the physical benefits of this. But the literature out there also shows that adding 30 minutes a day to your routine of just walking actually has an impact on our mental health as well. So I guess my question is, how does walking affect our brain, especially as we age well?
Well, that's a great point. And has a real profound effect on our mental health. It's not just good for the body, it's also good for the brain. Research has shown that regular walking can improve your mood, reduce anxiety, and even help with depression. As we increase cardiac output, the amount of blood that we're pumping in a minute's time, the amount of blood that is actually pumped, the percentage of blood that is actually moving to the brain decreases somewhat. But as more blood is being pumped, despite having a slightly lower total kind of participation in that cardiac output, we're getting more blood to the brain. And so the more we're moving, the more circulation we're getting, the more oxygen we're getting to the brain, the healthier that's going to be for neuroplasticity and just improving overall brain health. There was a 2020 meta-analysis published in Psychology and Health that reviewed about 30 articles and found that walking was consistently associated with improvements in both mental health and cognitive function. And so for older adults, walking can help reduce the risk of cognitive decline. And so if you're concerned about Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, walking regularly as a preventative measure is going to be beneficial. And there was also an article in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease published in 2019 that found that walking, particularly when it was done in nature, so getting outdoors, being able to have an experience in that walking rather than just kind of walking on a treadmill in the gym, staring at a wall. When we walk, particularly in nature, it can improve brain function and actually even delay the onset of dementia.
Do you think it has something to do with like dopamine levels? The reason why I ask is after I'm really stressed or something and I just need time to decompress, if I go on a walk, it has a calming effect on me, especially if I walk outdoors or even going on a hike, right? It's almost like ever stress I'm feeling just kind of all goes away. It's almost as if I'm meditating as I'm walking, and it helps clears my mind. I don't know if you feel that effect, but is there something about being in nature that seems to clear our head? There is something about nature that seems to clear our head. Is there science to back up that feeling, or is it just me?
Yeah, well, you're unique, Corbin. Absolutely, there is that benefit. I'm chuckling to myself because I don't reap the benefits of being out physically in the environment. I'm much more of, when I'm out and I'm moving, like if I'm kayaking or if I'm hiking, I'm not about, oh, look at the beautiful trees and the animals and all that stuff. It's like, where's my heart rate at? I got to get, burn the calories. I got to push myself. And my wife is the one that's the total opposite. She's taking her time, walking more slowly and embracing the nature around her. So I need to personally do a little bit better job of reaping the mental benefits of walking more so than just the physical benefits. But definitely walking outdoors, especially in green spaces, can have great benefits on our mental health. And there was a 2019 study that was published in Scientific Reports. And again, we'll have links to all these studies in the description notes, but it showed that walking in a natural environment as opposed to an urban environment results in reduced levels of cortisol, which is often described as that stress hormone. And I am not as inclined to refer to cortisol as a stress hormone, but it is a very important regulatory hormone. And so we see reduced levels of cortisol and increased positive feelings of well-being. And so this is a phenomenon that's sometimes referred to as green exercise. And it's interesting, our last episode, or one of the recent episodes we just had, is mentioned Dr. Patel. We interviewed her, and she's all about green dentistry. Well, now I'll be bringing into my exercise science classes the idea of green exercise. We joked with her that we need to get to a point in society where we drop the green. We don't have to be talking about something being green. Maybe when we talk exercise in the future, it will be more about getting outdoors, getting moving in our environment, as opposed to just simply going to a gym and walking on a treadmill or sitting on a stationary leg ergometer. But this green exercise combines the physical activity benefits of walking with the restorative effects of nature. So it is clear that walking in natural environments is a powerful tool, both physically and mentally, for our overall health.
It's just fascinating how something so simple as walking can lead to such great benefits. And I would also recommend our listeners go back and listen to our interview with Dr. Patel. I think it was a great interview and really inspiring. So if you're not just wanting to know about walking, but you're also curious on oral hygiene, then definitely dive into that podcast episode, because there's a lot of cool facts. This episode is about walking. So to summarize, walking for just 30 minutes a day can improve cardiovascular health, reduce inflammation, enhance your mood, and even benefit cognitive function. But what does it affect on our longevity? Is there a connection between walking and longer life?
Well, of course there is. And I think, again, that's been something that is not earth-shattering new science or anything like that. But there was a study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that found that people who engage in just 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week had a 31% lower risk of premature death. And this is pretty significant if you consider that walking is one of the most accessible forms of moderate exercise. And so walking just 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, can help you live longer. In addition, there was a study in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology that showed that even people with chronic conditions such as heart disease or diabetes could significantly increase their life expectancy by adopting regular walking habits. And the sad thing is, I think that statistically right now, more than 66% of the population is not meeting the minimum physical activity guidelines, which means more than 2/3 of the American population are not getting in their 30 minutes of walking 5 days a week.
That's crazy. But I see it living in America. You see, it's not hard, especially when you work in the field that I work in, and you get to see all walks of life enter the building and all forms of the general public. So yeah, I can see it. But it's also crazy because it doesn't seem like a lot, and yet we're not able to hit that minimal amount. And it's kind of heartbreaking. But it's also a really powerful statement as well. And it really drives home the point that you don't need a gym membership, and you don't have to complicate exercises to achieve a longer, healthier life. Just a simple movement of daily walking can add wonders of benefits to you. And I would strongly encourage people to just take that first step and move forward with it.
Bad pun there.
And
But exactly, walking is low impact. It's easy to incorporate into our daily routine, and it's available to almost everyone. The key is going to be consistency, making it a habit. And the best part is that the benefits are going to start to appear almost immediately. And most people will report feeling more energized, they're going to be sleeping better, and experiencing less anxiety after really just a few weeks of regular walking.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I really think 30 minutes of walking today can add longevity to our life. I think it can help with food digestion. The literature out there can say it'll tell you that it can improve your sleep. And obviously, all the health benefits that we talked about today. So to me, it's no-brainer. But I'm hoping that whoever's listening to this, that this has been an eye-opening discussion. And I'm also encouraging you to be motivated to lace up your shoes and start walking after hearing all of these amazing benefits.
Yeah, and I actually hope everybody is listening to this podcast with headphones on and during their walk. I hope that everyone feels inspired to take that first step, as you mentioned, that poor pun, toward a healthier and happier life. And we do encourage those who are starting their journey to progressively increase that intensity of their workouts by just adding a little bit more to their walking, but also remembering to add resistance training into that program. And it doesn't have to be heavy weights. It could be banded exercise, body weight exercises, but add some resistance training as well, because with that added strength in the body, you're going to be able to walk more effectively, and it's going to make this walking experience that we're encouraging much more pleasurable and more productive.
Great points, Dr. Armstrong. So let's wrap this up. Walking for 30 minutes a day can reduce the risk of heart disease, lower inflammation, improve mental health, and even extend your lifespan. It's really simple, it's accessible, and backed by solid science. There's a lot of literature out there. If you don't believe us, you can go see it for yourself. We'll post the links in the description. So what are you waiting for? Get outside, take a walk, and start reaping the benefits today. Again, thanks for tuning into the Aging Well podcast. Until next time, keep moving forward one step at a time in order to age well.
Age well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.